We have some lessons here from the book of Isaiah, the book of Yeshayahu. Read Yeshayahu 33. There's Isaiah 33, and we'll continue with this idea that we're talking about, that the current state of the American hegemony is like that of Assyria at the time of Hezekiah, right? Remember? The United States of Assyria.
One of the books I haven't finished.
Yeshayahu was a book, okay, but if let's go back into our Jewish history, the rise of the Neo-Babylonian, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Wait a minute, am I still on Zoom? I lost it. Okay, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. What's going on there? Well, they were pretty much they came to a sudden end. Their empire. It lasted for, I don't know, the better part of 2 centuries or so, and they were the ones who took the 10 tribes into exile. Many of the well-known emperors of Assyria are mentioned explicitly in Tanakh. Tiglath-Pileser, Pul, Sancheriv, Esarhaddon, and a few of his children also mentioned there. Sorry, Sancheriv and his children. Esarhaddon was the one who ruled after him, and basically takes us to the rise of the Babylonian Empire, which followed shortly thereafter. And we're saying how King Ahaz was analogous to the current regime because he was stuck in their orbit and he was following whatever they told him to do, and he was trying to kiss up to them, and he was following their idolatry. It was a really bad situation. This analogy is, interesting enough, extended because they also suffered an amazing downfall. The Assyrian Empire had a very sudden end, how it collapsed after, I guess it was Esarhaddon's death. In the times of King Menashe, they captured King Menashe, who was Chizkiyahu's son, and they took him away to Bavel. But he it says, he made his way back to his kingdom after he repented. And this is beyond the scope of what we're showing now, but apparently he was within the first 20 years of his reign. Something happened that they had taken him into captivity, but somehow, and this is unheard of, his descendants who were taken into Babylonian captivity just weren't let go. For example, the Jewish king Jehoiakim was captured by the Babylonians and died on his way to Bavel. He was a Russia. Tzidkiyahu was taken, his brother was taken into captivity. He was the last king of Yehuda, and he died. And he was one of Nebuchadnezzar's favorite victims there in Bavel. The Gemara has all sorts of things, all terrible tortures that Tzidkiyahu used to suffer at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. And his nephew Jehoiachin, who also had been king, and the nephew had been king before the uncle because the uncle was significantly younger. So Jehoiachin, who had only been king for 3 months, he was the one who was taken in prisoner to Bavel and basically was made to rot in jail in a dungeon for most of his life until this the end of the Book of Kings. He was let out, and that starts the Davidic line in Bavel. Apparently, also the Messianic line. Zerubbabel was his grandson. That's how it starts again. So the fact that a Jewish king was taken captive to Bavel by the Assyrians who ruled Bavel at the time, and then suddenly it says in Divrei Yomim, he repented, he cried out to God, and God brought him back to his kingdom. The details of that are kind of iffy. So we propose that it's because of the upheavals with the whole fall of the Assyrian Empire. The people took him into captivity and the rise of the Babylonians in their stead. Now, the fall of the Assyrian Empire is foretold by none other than the prophet Isaiah, right? He has a lot to say. First, the downfall of Assyria begins with the miraculous, I guess I wouldn't even say victory, the miraculous end to the siege of Sancheriv around Jerusalem. Remember what we're talking about? It happened they say it happened on Passover. What happened? Sancheriv was completing his conquest of the city. He had it under siege. It was around Passover time. And a miracle happened in the middle of the night. God came and smote his entire host. Just enough men for him to get on his chariot and ride back to Nineveh. And then it says, to complete the deal, his own children assassinated him. And that's also something that's attested to in a few of the books of our Bible. It's mentioned in 3 places. And also the history books. His sons had a whole succession crisis there going. And the older 2, I think it's Adramelech and Saretzer, wherever they anglicize the names differently, they came out and assassinated him right in the middle of the temple of Nisroch. And that's how Esarhaddon became king. There was the 3rd son. So they said that he got his comeuppance, but the comeuppance continued. That's just the beginning of it. So the Assyrians fell. Why did the Assyrians fall? Because they were terrible people. They're corrupt and they were idolatrous. They were really big idolaters. And that's sort of what's happening now with America. America has fallen into a terrible idolatry. Perhaps we could have said once upon a time America was decent, law-abiding place that had good values, objectively speaking, and not for Jews, of course, but as far as nations of the world go, they had God's blessing because they were doing things right for a while. And they've completely gone off the derech. And they're going to go down, just like the Assyrians went down. But the problem is they're trying to drag us down with them. You can imagine all the terrible things, you just come back to the war, all the terrible things that they're trying to impose on us, terrible ideas, they've actually put into practice themselves. So, for example, they do not want us to have border integrity. They want us to live under threat of enemies who could just rush the border. I think my father was telling me this years ago when Trump was president. He said, what's protecting you from the people of Gaza or any other place full of enemies just rushing the fence? Enough people just to overwhelm your border. What's going to stop them? What could stop them? And the answer is, turns out nothing. If they have enough people, they could overrun any yishuv around here also. That's why we have to be ready to repel them, right? So they already have. It's been, how long has Biden been president for? The current regime has basically destroyed, we talked about this before, the integrity of the southern border of the United States. It doesn't exist in practice. Yeah, this would be the fourth year. So the states are under threat, Texas especially, but also the problem spreads to other states. It spreads north. You heard about the civil war that started yesterday in the United States. Texas versus the federal government. Well, the federal government is basically making the border porous. They're enforcing the openness of the border. Everybody just come one, come all. And you know that aside from Mexicans and South Americans, against whom I have nothing per se, they didn't do anything to me. Just saying, those are the people who are coming in. People are also making their way from other parts of the world. People who might harbor, aside from the usual problems of third world immigration, economic issues, social issues, cultural issues, criminal issues. You have people who are basically perhaps, aligned with Islamo-fascist terrorist groups making their way into the United States with among all those millions. So that's what's going on right now. So we've talked about this. You could see it happening in front of your face. And the state of Texas is trying to enforce the border and enforce the law. And the federal government is not letting them. Yeah, that's crazy. So
Texas have its own rights because it joined the
Union. So they have that's the whole thing. Secession is now being talked about. Why? Because the federal government is supposed to do its job. So it could say, yeah, but we're the federal government. We do what we want, even if it means the exact opposite of what we're supposed to do. And the governor of Texas made a whole declaration. The federal government is basically doing the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do, protect us. Does the federal government have a right to turn its guns against the people of the United States? Probably not. And that's why this is a terrible thing going on. So I'll give another example. So the United States wants us not to have a strong border. The current regime, by the way, I'm not saying Democrats and Republicans, by the way, even though it happens to be both parties, the people who are doing it, that's the Democrats, and the Republicans who are the silent helpers, the ones who are facilitating it. And there are a few people there who are trying to stop it, the regular people and so-called politicians in a good way, so-called, because they're only affiliated because they have to be. There's only two affiliations in America, the people who are against the system. So they also, for example, believe in funding and arming the bad guys, right? That's what they want us to do. I think, thank God, the people who recently stopped the shipment of so-called humanitarian aid, I would call anti-Semitic aid, to the Gaza Strip. They got it to stop. They stopped the trucks. I think I'm a real coward. I should have gone there and done what they did. And you heard what happened. They stopped the trucks. They said they made a human wall in front of the trucks. You have to run over us. You cannot provide aid to the enemy. But then again, the American regime in the last few years gave a whole load of materiel, arms, and all sorts of stuff to the bad guys who were overrunning Afghanistan. You're aware of this. And then they give billions and untold amounts of money to the Iranians leading up to the current war. And the day of that dark Shabbos, what they do, the bad guys later in the afternoon, celebrating their praising victory over the Zionist occupational forces, they thank the Iranians for all the money. Where do they think they got all the money? So we have a real problem. The American regime funds the enemy, arms the enemy, and right now they're telling us to fund and arm the enemy. That's what they're trying to do for the other side. They're trying to reward the bad guys. They destroy their own country's democratic system. They don't want elections, free and fair elections. They don't want people to have a choice. They don't want a free speech, and they're also trying to get us to mirror it. And I don't know who's more evil: the American regime, who's trying to impose all these terrible ideas on us that they have, basically also the the complete over the complete misuse, the complete corruption, and the complete abuse of the legal system. You know, political persecutions. That's a mitzvah. Goyim are supposed to keep a system of law and order, and they just use the legal system for their own political advantage, which is terrible. So all these bad ideas that the Americans are doing, all these terrible things that they're doing to themselves, they're also making us do. And I don't know who's worse, the regime that in America that's doing it, or our so-called leaders who are going along with it. They could resist, but they're being a bunch of ahazes and just going along with it. So I don't know who's more evil. Basically, whatever bad America's doing, they're making us do with them. And you could go point by point, and perhaps we can make a chart, even, because I like making charts. So point by point, how they're dragging us down. That's a bad thing, and we have to break out of this. And so we see that just like the Assyrians, we're going to break out of this. The Assyrians are going to have their downfall. Am Yisrael will continue. Yeah, we might have to suffer quite a few setbacks because of it, but we're going to continue just like the Assyrians came on the stage and now they're gone. The Babylonians came on the stage and they're gone. Think the book of Daniel, the dream of the four kings, the four beasts, right, representing the kingdoms. There's a succession. We're still going to be there. We'll be there long after them. But America's going down, and the whole point is try not to go down with them. I wonder what's going to be like 30 years from now when we're all going to be speaking Chinese. Well, get ready. How do you laugh in Chinese? Okay, I don't know. How do you laugh in Chinese? In Israel, you say ha ha ha, right? Like it says in those children's books we used to have. Yeah, it's a big problem. It's a big problem.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.